Yeah, so a lot of people get confused when you say accelerationism because they think you're talking about like the tech bro stuff, but really what we're talking about when we talk about accelerationism in terms of like this new domestic terrorism landscape, it's a doctrine or set of tactics that people are using to accelerate the collapse of Western tradition, a Western society. It's a form of terrorism, and the idea is basically that by going out and provoking terror attacks, by provoking chaos, or by inciting division and fighting within different political factions in the U.S., you can facilitate this collapse, whether it be a financial collapse or a civil war. This kind of fantasy they live out is that in the smoldering ashes of the U.S., they will rebirth something that's unique to various different groups that utilize accelerationism, be it some kind of like extreme fascism or what have you. So it's really a new type of domestic terrorism that's being used to provoke and incite people, especially vulnerable people, into committing terror attacks by proxy for some of these groups. Well, it can definitely be traced back to like philosophers like Julius Evola. That's actually one that's really frequently, I guess, boosted up in these communities. Like they want you to read these kind of old philosophy books about collapse. Obviously, Siege, James Mason's Siege is a big part of it. That's more of like a newer version of accelerationism that focuses on more like decentralized networks and the importance of decentralized networks. And that's actually brilliant, evil, brilliant, but brilliant in the sense that without a serious organizational structure, law enforcement is constantly having to fight to keep up with these guys. So that's definitely been something that transformed the terrorism landscape as well. As far as recently, to identify the way accelerationism as a theory is being exploited by bad actors, I have to give all the credit to this military analyst, Jade Parker, who I stumbled upon a year and a half ago, that really kind of, and I've had a lot of people watch my video about Jade Parker and me finding all of this and tell me like, this, I kind of saw the pieces and I kind of understood, but that just really like put it all together and I finally understood what was going on. So I credit her work for really bringing that to the public attention as it exists today. Basically, when I came across Jade, it's because I was already kind of familiar with what was going on. I kind of already figured out that, like, for example, mass shootings weren't lone wolf actors like we thought, right. That there were actually people talking to these kids on Telegram and on Discord. And so I was chasing around leads trying to figure out who these people were. I wanted to know who they were. And I found myself, interestingly enough, in the incel community. This is the involuntarily celibate community, which is these socially rejected young men who think they'll never be able to find a girlfriend, and they're mad about it, right? And I noticed that they were being kind of funneled into this echo chamber forum where this website where they were just being radicalized against society, right? Nihilism is a big part of this. So like, right. Making it hopeless to them. And then I noticed that there were people there who were provoking specifically to violence. And this kind of matched what I was looking for. And so that's when I got in contact with a woman who did a podcast about incels. And she told me that my theories that I was telling her were almost identical to her friend Jade's. And it wasn't until sometime later that I ended up trying to find Jade. And then I came to find that Jade was missing and nobody had heard from her several months, and that she had put what she called a dead man switch online and kind of hid it. We had to kind of dig to find it. But the dead man switch that she called it really outlined how she had come up with this idea of militant accelerationism that we are talking about right now, and how the academics in her circle wanted to steal that idea from her and kind of distort it and not give her any credit. And then after that, she went missing. There were some unusual people that he had contact with online prior to the shooting. And even his family had said to me that they noticed a change in his behavior around the time he started talking to these individuals. And some of these individuals, he even flew around the country to visit. And there's pictures of him shooting guns with some of these people. The people who he was in contact with, though, came from a gore website, which is that's another common theme that you're going to see, is that these guys are getting involved in certain fringe online communities that either glorify violence or desensitize you to violence. And somehow from there they get in, kind of, I would say brainwashed, brainwashed into believing that they need to go commit some kind of large scale attack in order to facilitate whatever it is that they're being groomed to do. Mhm. It's a mishmash. I mean, like, if you go to the incel forum, you can see that what you're describing a lot more directly, which is like really black. It's called the black pill for a reason. They're trying to convince these kids that there's no solution, that like society has failed them, women have failed them. They're never going to get a girlfriend. There's no point in even trying. And at this point, then once they're at rock bottom, then they're primed for these people to come in and say, you know what, you might as well, if you don't kill yourself, you might as well just go out and be a martyr. You might as well just go out and make a change, make waves, right? Like, or they'll come out and say, you need to go attack a power grid, because once the U.S. infrastructure collapses, you'll have all the women you want to rape just running around the street scared. Like, it's ridiculous, right? But you can understand that the people who are falling for this, they've already just been taken down to the bottom of the barrel so that they feel like there's no other way out. So that's one thing I see. You mentioned compromise, and I've also seen them use that, basically saying, if you want to prove yourself for our group, this is more along the lines of like 764 and NLM stuff, or the MKU cult that you were talking about. If you want to be part of our cult, then you have to go and video yourself committing an act of terror. And if you don't do that, you can't be part of our group. Or you have people basically saying, using people's dirty laundry to try to get them to do it any way they can. They will. I would say that it's what I'm seeing is a lot less sophisticated than what I expected to see, which is what you're describing. I was really expecting to see some real sophisticated brainwashing, but really it's a lot more stochastic in nature, where they're throwing out a wide net, finding the person I think is vulnerable, and then figuring out how they can coerce that person to go do that act. Actually, I think that it has a much more innocent explanation, being now that I've seen all of this for so long, and I've seen so many arrests so far. Like, it's crazy to see like the person that we're like, this is him, a provocateur, we're researching him, right? And then he gets busted and goes like Butcher did, that you're talking about from MKU, Mikhail Chikikvishvili. That to me was like, wow, they did arrest him. They arrested this guy. And the reason that it took so long partially is because they're anonymous individuals online. And it's really kind of hard to find who some of these people are when they're using like Tor and VPN and fake identities. And then you have the added challenge that this guy's in Moldova. He's in Georgia, the country. He's in Serbia. These people are in Ukraine. Like, how do we get to these people? There's a challenge being that a lot of them are international as well. And then if they're American, a lot of times the problem becomes, and I'm kind of on the fence about whether call this a problem, but there's a very, very high bar that you have to meet for people who aren't actually committing violence, right? To get them on charges of like inciting violence, it's a very high bar. So I guess the level of free speech, you have to overcome a specific requirement to kind of meet that. And I think that what we're seeing is that also, I think we were early when we were noticing and identifying this stuff. I don't think that even I'm sure the feds had noticed it I'm sure they knew about it, right? But they hadn't actually really started moving on it. We've seen about 3 or 4 arrests now of people who I would consider shadowy provocateurs. And as much as like when I started this research, I expected them to be like feds or like CIA contractor dudes, like scruffed up murder. They're scrawny little geeks who look like they've honestly never left their house. They look like they've spent the last 5 years behind a computer, and some of them are very young. And it's just mind blowing. Yeah, no, you're right, 100%. Like, so there's the reality, and then there's how the reality is construed after the fact. And what we were seeing was that, like for example, with Jade Parker's academic colleagues, they were the ones who were really pushing this like far right extremism angle. And for me, I've always been like, well, this isn't far right at all. Like, this is far left. Like, these people are like national socialists. Like, these people, or a lot of them are very, or anarchists. Like, this isn't, like, saying far right is very sneaky term that's intentionally used to kind of get people thinking that this is like conservative, like a conservative phenomenon, when it's not. This is just extremism. And so yeah, of course they're going to take that and twist it and politicize it. Even the FBI and the feds and stuff have a tendency to kind of make it seem more like it's far right extremism. And I'm hoping that that's going to change soon, as more facts start coming out and people start paying attention to this, like 764 NLM. I mean, these are foreign actors from Eastern Europe. These are foreign terrorists. This isn't even something that's a lot of times it's not even domestic. So yeah, I have high hopes that we're going to see some changes here soon. It's super fascinating. And kind of what you just explained is accelerationism. The way that this far left and the far right and all these weird, satanic wackos all meet on this concept of collapse. And so they can use each other and they can work with each other without agreeing with each other ideologically. And I think that's really important to note. As far as the Order of Nine Ankles goes, so David Myatt himself, he's British. I don't know that he definitely was involved in some sketchy Operation Gladio era like ops around neo-fascism back in like the 70s and 80s. He started this, everybody, this is an interesting cult, okay, because there's a lot of questions around how it actually arose and who started it, and you really don't have much to go by except for David Myatt's word on a lot of it, unfortunately. But if you're listening to like what the traditional agreement is, it's that David Myatt started this cult. He was a longtime National Socialist. He was involved in a lot of Gladio era neo-fascist groups like Column 88 and those kinds of things. And then he basically decided to get into esoteric occultism, and he joined a very fringe cult in the UK. And then I think what happened is that person ended up leaving and he took over it. And he geared his cult towards National Socialism and collapse. But the way he wanted to do that was by creating this praxis, this philosophy around this new Eonic era of, Aryan, an Aryan imperium, where like basically only the fittest Aryans would survive the collapse, and then they would go on to colonize the Milky Way, because of course they would. Of course, there's like an apocalyptic death cult vibe to this because it was the 70s, you know. And so that he actually built this whole Lovecraftian cult. I mean, it's really similar to Scientology in this sheer amount of like literature that he published on this. Very, very prolific. And so the idea behind the cult was you started in the cult, and then you infiltrated various organizations and tried to subvert them to push National Socialist ideology. And if you're listening to what Myatt believes, he thought that this was the best way to kind of get National Socialism in a position where it could actually win. He didn't think that there was any hope for the National Socialist movement at the time. And so, by going and subverting and doing sinister acts, which include, murdering people, which they call culling, these are the ways that we're going to basically end the Judeo-Christian era of civilization and start a new sinister eon of evil where they would be the rulers of the galaxy. That's Order of Nine Ankles. It's evolved over time to include people from all over the world. There's plenty of different Nexians that have come out. Some of them have feuded. Some of them don't like to be called Order of Nine Ankles anymore. Myatt himself seems to, and I've used this term a lot, but to me, I've talked to him multiple times, and to me, he just seems like an old man full of regret. He desperately tries to separate his group, the Order of Nine Angles, from the child abuse components that came later. Even though it seems kind of self-evident that a religion based around doing the most evil stuff imaginable to collapse society would eventually give rise to some of the stuff we're seeing, like the 764 network. So that's kind of what happened.
Well, you did mention in your video that there was a connection between him and the FBI. Is that the case?
So you're talking about Joshua Sutter. Joshua Sutter was the creator of a Nexian called Temple of Blood. That Nexian was eventually disavowed by David Myatt. And that's the one, Joshua Sutter is the one who wrote all of these disgusting books about child sexual abuse and basically turned that into like a mainstream, like a tenet of the Temple of Blood. Now, the Temple of Blood, it ended up, Joe Sutter under Temple of Blood, affiliation, infiltrated Atomwaffen division.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's how we found out that he was a federal informant, because during the trials of the Atomwaffen guys, they tried to put this forward as like a biased case because they had shown that the person who had tipped everybody off was an informant who also ran a rival sect of satanic, neo-Nazis. And that person was easily identified from the criminal complaint as being Joshua Sutter. So he got outed. And that was really, really impactful because now, honestly, the FBI and the DOJ really need to address why this person was allowed to inform and give information to law enforcement while also pushing this kind of ideology is very concerning. So that's kind of misleading. I think that what I've put together is that he was paid to be an informant. So he was paid for, like, I guess I don't know how they do it, like for the arrest that he made, right? Like he was paid for
like how successful it was.
Yeah, I guess so. And it just so happened that during that time, he was also publishing these books. So yeah, technically, if the FBI was paying him and he was using that money to put out books, whether the FBI knew about that or not is,
gotcha.
But regardless, it's an ethical quandary, right?
Right. One more question on Mike before we go to break. I know, if I recall reading about him, he also kind of moved into radical Islamic philosophy for a while. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was back, I think, in probably the 90s or so. I'm not sure exactly, but that's a great example of an insight role, which is what these guys call it when they infiltrate some kind of different organization and try to subvert it from within and gain experience for themselves. 764 is a child exploitation and extortion network. It's a group of individuals who they really just sexually abuse, and otherwise extort and harm children. That's their focus. It's part of a broader community online known as COM, which is just a network of cyber criminals. The people who were found to be swatting figures like Tim Pool and Marjorie Taylor Greene were connected to this COM network. In fact, almost all of the doxing and swatting and school fake bomb threats and school shooting hoaxes are coming from this group. It's a very serious problem. So stemming off of that, this group of really just nasty kids online, it seems that at some point they were, I wouldn't say infiltrated, but I would say influenced by some of this satanic ideology that we've been covering. And that made its way into a spinoff group called 764, which was focused on, satanic imagery, getting kids to self-harm on camera, carve their abusers' names into their bodies, and paint satanic imagery on the walls with blood, really shocking stuff. They would use sexual content they would get from the kids to extort them and force them to do more and more egregious things on camera, including killing their pets, and up to and including committing suicide on camera. It's really, when I say this, I've investigated a lot of crazy stuff. This is the most evil thing that you can imagine happening. It is so, some of the people who've been arrested in these cases are getting nailed to the wall. Thankfully, like the justice system is seeing that the evil nature of their crimes goes past, beyond what our legal system can code, right? Like when you get charged with production and distribution of child pornography, like this is the most extreme example that you could really have. And all of it's happening online for the most part. They recruit kids from all different areas of the internet. One of the biggest ones that's been highlighted the most is the Roblox and Minecraft communities, where they would make Roblox characters with swastikas all over them and a shirt that said CP lover, and they would go and invite kids to Discord servers. And then in the Discord server, they would basically just be exposing the kids to child sexual abuse material, gore, and things of that nature, to just kind of desensitize them and honestly recruit them into the group, not just to abuse them, but to create new abusers. Right. It's almost like like recruiting people. And then as far as the victim pools, they came from a lot of different areas as well, like eating disorder communities and self-harm, suicide forums, and places where they knew that they would find teens that were at their lowest that they could exploit. Right. And so that's kind of all of that came together into some of the most horrific imagery I can imagine being subjected to. I've seen stuff from this group that's just beyond comprehension. Yes, Kyle Spitz, man, what a crazy viral plot twist, right? So I saw this video of him getting clipped in the ear by a bullet, and I, just like everybody else, I was like, this is a wild video. What is happening here, right? There's no context. And everybody mostly was just calling the stepdad crazy. Right. But then so at this time when that video came out in January, I had already been researching 764 for a bit. I already knew of their existence and had been trying, kind of following and starting to research how that came to be. So it was already on my radar. And then when that video came out, I started seeing the comments. Victims were trying to get attention to themselves, saying that this guy was part of 764. So to me, I was like, whoa, here we go. And I was able to find him and find his Telegram channel and find all of his friends and map out their network within a couple of days. And I was able, that was about a week later after that video went viral, is when his mother died. And he posted a video of himself with her dead body on Telegram. And it was just so crazy, man. It was so crazy. So then the victims kind of asked me if I could make a tweet about it, because they were tired of him. Like in Law and Crime YouTube channel had like interviewed Kyle Spitz, like, oh, we're so happy you're okay. And like, I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, I'd be mad if I were a victim too. So I put this tweet out telling them, like, don't expect much because I'm really a nobody. And then the tweet blew up because people were like, oh my God, this is an insane plot twist, right? It turns out that the kid who got shot was one of the most evil people imaginable. Now, I don't think the stepdad was necessarily much better. I mean, I think the whole family was just like a lost cause. Okay. They were all bad. However, I think that was really what got people kind of drawn in. And from there, we were able to kind of start spreading awareness about this group that had really gone under-recognized. A lot of people didn't know it existed. And to me, it was really important to start warning parents, warning people about this, because these people are preying on your kids everywhere on the internet. And every parent needs to be aware of this group and what they're doing. So I have a theory about it that's been increasingly validating itself as time goes on. But what it seems to me like what happened is, so the MKU is a Ukrainian-based neo-Nazi satanic cult of serial killers. It's fun stuff. There was a person named Igor Krasnov who had taken inspiration from these people who'd gone on this like famous murder spree with hammers, right? And this guy, Igor Krasnov, was just an insane person. He started this kind of cult, and we saw evidence that Igor was also into O9A and into the satanic ideologies. Now, Igor got arrested because he had Russian nationals committing terror attacks in Russia. So the Russian government put out information that, hey, these guys are terrorists. These guys are a neo-Nazi satanic cult. And it's funny is the American media back then when this happened were like, that's Russian disinformation and stuff, right? But then all these years later, this year actually, his successor, whose name was Butcher, was arrested for provoking terror attacks against the U.S., and he was planning some really sick stuff. So now those same news outlets were being forced to basically admit that this is real. There is a Ukrainian neo-Nazi Satanist cult. And so in terms of how they got involved with 764, my theory is that they saw this as a group they could infiltrate and get people to do evil stuff, because obviously they can, right? They're already doing the most evil stuff imaginable. And so I think what happened is that MKU came into 764 and they tried to create a spinoff group called NLM, which stands for No Lives Matter. And that group was like, hey, we're not going to focus on child exploitation or extortion. We're going to focus on real life actions, terror attacks. To be one of us, you have to go commit a mass stabbing, a mass shooting on camera, right? And so I think that that's how MKU merged with 764, is that they saw them as a proxy terrorist pool of patsies, right, to go do stuff on their behalf. I mean, I don't personally know, but however, it's really hard to look at these groups and not see Gladio era ops, right? I mean, you look at this and you're like, wow, this really does seem like there's intelligence and community involvement. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Granted, I don't have any research to show you this, but yeah, I mean, just given like the history that you described and what we're seeing, it's definitely a question that you could ask. The Haters Handbook. So the Mujahideen's Poison Handbook, I don't know if he just had that like separately. But the Haters Handbook is what I would consider a terrorism manual. It is an instructional guide on how to commit terrorism. It includes mass shootings, mass stabbings, truck rammings, poisoning, how to make ricin, how to make bombs.
Did you see that just happened in Germany? There's a massive truck attack in Germany
today?
Just now. Yeah, just now.
Oh no! I mean, I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, I don't know that connects to this. I'm just on.
Honestly, it seems like all of them do now lately. Since I started looking into this, like honestly, almost every attack like this has been somehow linked to not necessarily just to MKU, but to this festering accelerationism doctrine, right? But the Haters Handbook itself that does have like recipes for ricin, recipes for bombs, and it's also got a heavy satanic element. Like it's basically like, here is why we're connecting National Socialism and Satanism, and it's just an explanation of why we're doing it. And then it's a push for genocide, like you were talking about at the beginning, right? This idea that in order to accelerate the new eon, we have to genocide all of the scum, and it pushes nihilism and it pushes misanthropy, just the hatred of humans. And so anytime that I'm seeing this now pop up in manifestos, right, the word scum, the word, just hatred of humans, I hate my fellow man, and therefore all of them are scum, and therefore it's justified for me to go kill them because it's the right thing to do for evolution. Now that to me is like, boom, that stands out as this kind of ideology of collapse, and not just the accelerationist ideology of collapse, but also this specific idea that you need to go out and genocide people, specifically racial minorities and other groups that they target, in order to facilitate this like ethnic cleansing or this just mass genocide. So that's what I've been seeing come out a lot, including from the recent mass shooter from earlier this week. She had all of those. She checked those boxes. She was connected to some of these groups that I would consider to be, 764, 09A, and MKU influenced. It's very interesting. I don't know. However, I could definitely see either being the case. I could see her having been groomed by a bad actor and indoctrinated and provoked. I could also see, especially considering her involvement in what we call the TCC community, which is this mass shooter fan base community where they actually, it's usually teens who are in a really bad spot. A lot of them are committing mass shootings of their own, planning mass shootings of their own. It's a really, really scary and serious little group of people online. And this is the first time that I've seen that group. These are the ones that are making Columbine music edits with music, so this is the first time that I've seen that kind of group overlap with what we've been talking about. And that's really concerning because, again, this is a group of people that these guys know they can infiltrate and push to violence. And so, of course, they're going to do that. This is expected. Now, as far as her influence goes, in the manifesto, she had said her inspiration came from a mass stabber in Turkey. This happened back in August, and it didn't really make waves in the U.S. because it happened in Turkey. But this kid was directly influenced by MKU. In fact, he had written a manifesto of his own that was basically like a carbon copy of the Hater's Handbook that he had just kind of rewritten in Turkish. And so her shouting that guy out as her inspiration means that, you know, if she wasn't directly groomed by somebody related to that group, that she was a copycat, which is even kind of more scary, right? To think that now that they've put these people out here to commit these attacks, now we've got other people looking up to those people as martyrs and trying to copycat them. And it becomes kind of like a virality thing, which is very concerning. I don't know if she called them martyrs. She definitely used the word scum, which stood out to me. She also said, like, you know, why would I commit suicide when I could do something to move evolution forward by killing these people who are scum and less than human? And, you know, that's that idea of misanthropy and this idea that we need, you know, you need to go kill off. And you know, it's not just, even though there is a neo-Nazi component. I mean, it is based around like racial minorities and stuff as well, but it's also based around Judeo-Christian, you know, people who are Christian or Jewish. They don't want that. They're Satanist. They're satanic. Like they want a satanic rule. So this is a really scary network of people who are targeting pretty much anyone who's not an Aryan Satanist. I'd really like to see that. If you could send that to me, I'd love to check that out, because, you know, that sounds very much like the 098 praxis, which has to do with culling of everybody who doesn't follow the sinister practice. In other words, everyone who's not part of their cult gets genocided, right? If you're not a Niner, you're gone in this fantasy land where they colonize the Milky Way. So, you know, but what's crazy to me is that the influence, you know, of 098 that has in the Satanist, esoteric Satanism that's leaked into the entire domestic terrorism landscape. Like even, you know, as you know, Rupp now had referred to some mass shooters as saints. And that's the terminology that comes from this group called Terrorgram, which is a network of Telegram channels. It's just like violent extremists, right? And they specifically canonize these mass shooters, and they make calendars and like, oh, you want your place on the calendar, you have to go shoot. I mean, it's crazy. You know, it's absolutely insane. But it's crazy to me to see how the satanic influence has permeated all of these spaces. You cannot go to a neo-Nazi or neo-fascist or accelerationist or extremist Telegram channel anymore without finding these people who are pushing the satanic elements. It truly has just permeated every extremist corner of the internet.
It's a way to manipulate people to get recognition in a very narcissistic way, kind of like how serial killers, you know, they want the recognition. They're very much, you know, deluded narcissists. So they're playing on.
But that's also their downfall. So
exactly.
You know, luckily, a lot of these guys, especially in the 764 network, are obsessed with notoriety and fame. And I don't know if you've noticed, but man, it seems like every day now I'm reporting on a new arrest, a new, you know, some new news. They're falling like dominoes. I think that it's just because I don't know what happened at the federal level. Maybe they just decided this is a PR nightmare and we need to start cleaning these guys up. But there's definitely been a lot of arrests recently of these guys. And I think, like you said, their ego and their pride definitely leads to more attention that can lead to their arrests. Like the threats that they send me constantly. It's, you know, you're just bringing more attention to yourself. So it's more like the Columbine guys set like a precedent, right? And so they're worshipped at a very much a higher regard than the other, you know, mass shooters that they glorify. And then all the aesthetics that they use are seen as like these aesthetics that are edgy and cool, and like you want to give nods to your inspiration. And so it's less ideology based and more just like they're obsessed with the aesthetics. These people are like ultimate fans. Like imagine them as like, fans of like a band, right?
Like
who are
Taylor
just obsessed with this, like Taylor Swift fans, just insane. Yeah. Yes, but more evil, you know? Yeah. And you know, but they're adopting those aesthetics because that's what they embrace. They embrace that whole that scene of mass shooters, and so you see them doing that a lot. It's very common.
The account is BX on Twitter. You can find her. I've got her shared on my Twitter if you want to follow me as well. And what's your YouTube channel?
Well, my YouTube keeps getting banned, but I'm on Rumble, BX on Rumble.